There's something like over 11 days a year lost per worker per year from stress alone. There's over 129,000 deaths in the US every year attributed to stress alone. And the amount of money lost by businesses alone that's attributed to stress is something like over $190 billion a year.
Ouch.
And these are numbers that are just unsustainable.
Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Talent Growers, I have a treat for you today in the sense that we're talking to a real-life neuroscientist and psychiatrist who is really an expert on the way in which we respond to stress at work and the kind of health problems that it's creating, and specifically how to overcome these problems and what we need to change. So I think you're going to get pretty good ideas about things you can do for yourself and for your team as a result of listening to today's episode with Dr. David Rabin. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you thought afterwards. Here we go. Today, I'm excited that Dr. David Rabin is on the show. He is the Chief Innovation Officer, co-founder, and co-inventor at Apollo Neuroscience, Inc. In his role, Dr. Rabin is developing Apollo Neuroscience's IP portfolio and running clinical trials of the Apollo technology, the first scientifically validated wearable system to improve focus, sleep, and access to meditative states by delivering gentle, layered vibrations to the skin. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, I bet. Dr. Rabin is a board-certified psychiatrist, translational neuroscientist, and inventor, and has been studying the impact of chronic stress in humans for more than 10 years. He has specifically focused his research on the clinical translation of non-invasive therapies that improve mood, focus, sleep, and quality of life in treatment-resistant illnesses. He has 6 patent applications pending and many more on the way. He's received his MD in medicine and PhD in neuroscience from the Albany Medical College and trained in psychiatry at Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And we were introduced by another former podcast guest, Larry Joya. He was on episode 4. Dave, welcome to the Talent Grow Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm really looking forward to speaking with you. I think that it's a unique treat to talk to someone with your background and obvious intellectual capacity. And I think that talent growers are going to really enjoy learning from you today. But before we get started, I always ask my guests about their professional journey. Where did you start and how did you get to where you are today in a brief format?
That's a great question. I think we all have different paths that get us to where we eventually end up that are very informative about who we are and how we end up accomplishing all of the goals that we set out to do.
So true.
And I started out actually very interested in neuroscience research and consciousness as a kid, and particularly focused on dreams. And I used to have frequent dreams as a child that were so real that I thought waking up that they had actually happened. And it was so interesting to me that my brain could fool me into thinking that something that I was perceiving during sleep was actually something that had happened in real life. And so I started thinking about this more and more over the years, and eventually went into neuroscience, and I really became fascinated with the study of performance and resilience and recovery, and the idea that some people, for example, there are many people who will live into their 80s and 90s and feel great their whole lives for the most part and not be very ill with mental or physical illness, and manage to be resilient to the impact of stress. And then some of them have gone through many incredibly difficult challenges, by the way, and they've overcome and become better for it. And then, we see other folks who have gone through equal or greater or not as significant challenges, but for whatever reason, maybe not being prepared as well or not having as much support afterwards or during the challenges, they don't overcome them to the same extent, and it ends up taking a very significant toll. And so that really fascinated me, and I studied that with respect to dementia and age-related macular degeneration in human neural stem cells with Dr. Sally Temple at Albany Medical College. And then from there, I realized that I really enjoyed studying the chronic stress response on the whole person level. And so I went into psychiatry and focused on treatment-resistant mental illness, particularly PTSD, anxiety, depression, and substance use disorders.
Wow. And you were in the university system teaching and researching, and then you made a big change recently, huh?
Yeah. So I guess part of the big transition for me and part of why I felt so strongly about going into patient care was that, particularly in mental health, we have a lot of treatments for mental health conditions, but a lot of them don't tend to get the results that we are told they are supposed to get, or they have a significant amount of side effects. And so seeing that issue in mental health and knowing a lot of people who struggled with overcoming mental illness, I started looking into and learning about an enormous amount, especially during my psychiatry training, about the treatments that we have available and what their risk and benefit profile are. And what you realize very quickly, and a lot more about this has been published lately, is that what we call the number needed to treat, which is how many people do you need to give a medicine to or a therapy to see positive results on their symptom profile, versus the number needed to harm, which is how many people do you need to treat with a medicine or a therapy to see a side effect pop up, are actually the opposite of what we want them to be in many treatments for mental illness. So for example, practically speaking, if a doctor prescribes you an antidepressant, when you walk in and say, I have depression, or I feel depressed, and I felt depressed for 6 months, or whatever it is, doctor gives you an antidepressant. What they're not telling you most of the time, because oftentimes they're not taught this, or tell patients this, is that you're more likely to get a side effect from that medicine than you are likely to get a positive result from that medicine.
Fabulous.
Right. And so if we knew that as patients coming in, would that change the way that we approach our own treatment? And would we really invest in psychotherapy, for instance, which has almost no harm, before we went and tried a medicine as the quick fix? And it turns out that in psychiatry and mental health, there really are no quick fixes. And it's really about practicing skills that create positive change in your life to help you overcome some of the struggles that you've been through, and really relearning new ways to change habits that aren't serving us anymore in terms of stress coping habits and things like that. And so I left the university system for the development of a technology that I based on understanding how to help people make change more effectively. And what we found from studying an enormous amount of literature in the stress field, and also in the meditation field and the athletic and physical performance field, is that the things that make people the most resilient and that have the highest performance under stress is just safety. It's feeling safe in your environment and having the ability to self-generate those feelings of safety for yourself. And once you feel safe, you're able to adapt to change rapidly and perform at your best on a regular, consistent basis. And that applies to illness and healthy people.
This is, of course, something that I talk about as well. In fact, I have written and spoken on the podcast about this idea that the threat response, which is our reaction to feeling a lack of safety, causes us to move into that, fight or flight response that we all talk about a lot, and that you study, of course, at much greater level than I have. And that humans really were designed to interact with their environment and with other humans in very different circumstances. And biologically, or from an evolution perspective, not much has changed about how our brain reacts to the stimuli, the cues that are around us. You speak about this. So tell us more about what's going on with, you said earlier, chronic stress. And maybe you can explain more about that and why this fight or flight threat response is playing an unhelpful role in our current situation.
That's a great question. And I have to say, I was actually going to say earlier, I really admire you for tackling and bringing up these issues on your podcast, because they're things that people in the general corporate world really oftentimes sweep under the rug. But these are really critical concepts for us to understand to make sure that we manage our health and our productivity effectively. But ultimately, I think the easiest way to explain what you're talking about, this balance between stress and relaxation, or what we call fight or flight and rest and digest nervous systems, which are also called the parasympathetic, the rest and digest nervous system, that's responsible for creativity and relaxation and sleep and recovery and reproduction and digestion and immunity, is in balance with the stress response system, which is called the sympathetic system, which is the fight or flight or freeze response system. And so these two systems have evolved with not just humans, but all animals for millions and millions of years to conserve our ability to survive in threatening environments, and respond to threat in a critically important way to ensure survival, but also to make sure that when that threat is gone, that we're able to maximize our thriving in our safe environment. Ultimately, what that comes down to is that our bodies, I think, tapping into what you said a minute ago, our bodies are just not designed for the way that we work and the way that we're asked to work. And, our bodies are designed, and our sympathetic nervous system is designed to respond to acute threat, acute stress, which is stress that occurs in a moment or over a very brief amount of time. And then we activate the systems that allow us to deal with that stress, like the fight or flight or freeze response systems. And then we get out of that situation into a state of safety. And then the safety systems kick back on and allow us to thrive and function in a positive and fulfilled way again and recover energy. But the problem is when we start to attribute threat to things like emails or phone vibrations or buzzing or alarms or loud sounds or our kids screaming or things that are surrounding us all the time, what happens is we end up practicing and training our body to be in a hyper stress state or a high sympathetic state over time. And so what happens is that inhibits activity in the parasympathetic system over time, which is critical for all the things that we actually want to perform well, like creativity and adaptability and emotion control and mood regulation and energy management and all of these things. And so that's why we see when we work really hard and we're overworking ourselves and overwhelmed and stressed out all the time, we are more likely to get sick, we're more likely to sleep poorly, we're more likely to be irritable and sad. And this is across every human on the earth. And so the idea is that we should be focusing on activities in our free time, ideally, that can retrain our nervous system back into balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, which are activities that include things like deep breathing, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, good nutrition, exercise, a lot of the stuff that you talk about on your show. And by practicing these things over time, what it does is it retrains the nervous system to have more resilience and more basically constitution, so that when you enter a stressful situation, you're less likely to be fazed by it and you're more likely to adapt to it in a way that is positive and constructive for you. And so Apollo is the technology we developed that induces a sense of safety in the body through the sense of touch using vibration that can induce balance in the nervous system rapidly for people who are most of us really, who have not been taught how to do this ourselves or have not had the time to teach ourselves to do it. And then over time, it helps train you to access those states more effectively. But in truth, all of these states can be accessed on your own without any assistance from anything else.
Right. By learning the skills and then practicing them, right? Like how to figure out deep breathing or meditation or take a walk or whatever, different kinds of activities that you can take to recover from that stress and recalibrate.
Exactly.
I've been lucky enough to also see you speak with your partner, Catherine, and you talk about heart rate variability or HRV. And you talk about how we want to pay more attention to it. And specifically, we want to modulate it. So tell us more about that.
That's also a very good question, because heart rate variability has been in the news quite a bit lately, because almost every wearable device that we see around us that's commercially available will measure it or look at it in some way. Even the Apple Watch, the Oura Ring, Fitbits are starting to do it, Garmin's, and et cetera. And I think the reason for that is because heart rate variability over the last several years, probably 10 or 15 years actually, has been found by athletes in the military to be the single best predictor of recovery. So what heart rate variability is it's the rate of change of your heartbeat over time. So if you can imagine, when you measure your heartbeat and you say, for example, I have a heartbeat of 60 beats per minute, what we often assume is that there's 1 second between each beat every time. But the reality of it is that that's not true. Typically what happens is it's 1 second, and sometimes it's 1.2 seconds, and sometimes it's half a second, and it changes over time in response to our environment. And it changes in near real time in response to our environment. And so what we found over the years is that there's certain activities that boost heart rate variability, and there's certain things that decrease heart rate variability. And low heart rate variability is caused by stress, which is normal because when you're stressed out, you don't really care about the variability of your heartbeat. You just want your heartbeat to be very fast and your blood pressure to be high so you can get out of the threatening situation as quickly as possible. But when that happens consistently over time, over days, weeks, months, years, what happens is you have low heart rate variability consistently. And that correlates, now we know, with developing physical and mental illness. It correlates with poor productivity at work or physical activity, physical productivity, and it correlates very strongly with sudden cardiac death if you've had a heart attack in the past. And so all of these measures are valuable in different ways, but heart rate variability has come to the surface as something that has now been shown to be a very valuable predictor of how good our bodies are at adapting to and recovering from stress.
So let me stop you for a second. I just want, I sometimes help to
Sure.
concretize, it's hard to imagine exactly what you mean. So like if I were mapping out my heart rate, or if I had a device that helped me see my heart rate, when you say that you want to have more heart rate variability, that means that you want to see the graph go up and down, like higher, more range for the graph, or more variety over a period of time, or what exactly?
So you can't actually deduce heart rate variability from just looking at heart rate with your eyes. You need a computer algorithm to look at your heart rate over time. And it takes at least 3 minutes, really. I mean, you can do it faster, but typically it takes about 3 minutes to calculate heart rate variability accurately. And I think the best, maybe a simpler way to describe it would be that if you have low heart rate variability, meaning that there's exactly, for example, say exactly 1 second between each beat of your heart, and your heart's beating at 60 beats per minute, then that means a lion shows up and you need to get out of there. It's going to take your body and your heart longer to ramp up your heartbeat to a high heart rate and to get your blood pressure up, to get all of that blood to your muscles and your motor cortex to get you out of that threatening situation as quickly as possible. You're going to be one of the last to react. And similarly, when the lion is gone or the threat is gone, your body is going to be one of the last to calm down because your heart rate is not as quickly adapting to changes in the environment. However, if you have high heart rate variability, what that means is that your heart rate, it's a sign, a measure that your heart rate and your body are more quickly shifting with the environment. So when the lion shows up and you have high heart rate variability, your heart rate jumps up right away, your blood pressure jumps up right away, and you're one of the first ones out of that situation. And then when the lion or the threat are gone, you're one of the first ones to calm back down, back to homeostasis, back to your normal, balanced, safe state once safety has been established.
That's really helpful. So I think that then what it means is if you're in chronic state of stress, like you were saying, your heart rate is constantly too elevated and your body's constantly thinking that there's a lion around. Ultimately, it's almost like the boy who cried wolf, like your body's kind of going to ignore the signals because it's going to think that that's just normal.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. And to go one step further, that's why activities like deep breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and yoga and things of that, and biofeedback and things of that nature are so critically important because these are the natural techniques that have existed for, in the case of deep breathing and meditation, for thousands of years that naturally increase heart rate variability and train your body to be in a more balanced, high heart rate variability state. And so by practicing those techniques, you can gradually increase your heart rate variability, not just in the short term, but also cumulatively over time, which builds your resilience as a person.
Yeah. And probably it allows you to have more access, more awareness to the changes so that you can then pull on those skills when you need to.
Absolutely. And that can take a long time. It can take sometimes for meditation, tens of thousands of hours to become enough of a Buddha master to be able to bring those skills into real-time use. But over time, the more you practice, the better you get at it just by training your nervous system to do so.
Yeah.
But it just takes practice.
So the listeners are employees and they're leaders. Many of them are leading others. So what are some things that are really important for us to know in terms of our effectiveness as leaders that we can pull from the research and if you have a story or any statistics you can share, what are some things that we can pull from this to use to improve our situation and our teams?
I think the most important thing is sort of the epidemic of burnout, work-related burnout that's happening right now. Is a really serious issue. And it's frankly an avoidable tragedy. The WHO a couple months ago announced that work-related burnout or burnout due to work-related stress is a medical condition that warrants treatment.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a very serious statement. And that means that internationally, this is being recognized that work-related stress leading to illness is a real thing that's being acknowledged by the powers that be, and that something has to be done about it. And so I think, especially in America, there's a big push, and particularly in places like New York, LA, SF, these huge hubs of business and new tech development, is that there's a push to be as busy as you can, to, pull all-nighters, to basically push yourself to the limit of your abilities and sacrifice everything you have to achieve your idea's success and to make money and power and all these things. And whether you're a lower level employee or even if you're a manager or a leader in a business, and particularly if you're a manager or leader in a business. And I think that, it's very important as leaders and managers for us to recognize that we are literally killing ourselves with work and that, this has to be addressed very, very quickly because ultimately, and I think something that European countries, many of them have already figured out, is that people who are happier work more efficiently and they do better and they make less mistakes. And so if we can start to implement things as managers and leaders in our businesses that facilitate improved health and improved stress management, and that's why I think there's a big move towards corporate wellness, although it's not necessarily executed that well yet. But when we start to integrate newer technology and newer ways to help people other than just tracking their behavior, people will start to feel better and they will perform better and they will end up saving their companies an enormous amount of money and time because they are not making mistakes because of stress. And they're not missing days at work because of stress. And they're not, exhibiting absenteeism or presenteeism because of stress. Speaking of statistics, there's something like over 11 days a year lost per worker per year from stress alone. There's over 129,000 deaths in the US every year attributed to stress alone. And the amount of money lost by businesses alone that's attributed to stress is something like over $190 billion a year.
Ouch.
And these are numbers that are just unsustainable. So if we start to incorporate some of these positive health and coping strategies into our businesses, we will start to chip away at the burnout problem and people will start feeling better and doing better. But it has to come from a management and leadership level, ideally with the leaders and the management starting the process of role modeling positive skills.
Yeah, always, right? Like you don't want to be the do as I say, not as I do kind of leader on anything, including this. And it's hard, because there's so much pressure. Everybody feels like they have to do more with less. And that like wearing busyness as a badge of honor, it is really truly an epidemic. One of the things I've read too, and I've learned about from the research is that when people are in that stress mode and that threat response, not only are they not creative, they are less able to make good decisions. They're less able to solve problems. They're less able to do the things that they're hired to do and that the pressure is on for them to produce. Like we're actually causing people to be less effective in their role and in capitalizing on their skills.
That's absolutely right. And ultimately, what could be more frustrating, and we've all been there, what can be more frustrating than practicing doing something for so many years and then being put in a position to actually do the thing you've practiced to do, but not be able to do it because you're too stressed out or worried.
Yeah.
That inherently is futility, which is one of the single most frustrating experiences in human existence. And we're not trained to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so we have to really preempt it by putting ourselves into or curating really constructive environments that facilitate positive, healthy work patterns rather than work till you drop patterns.
Yeah. So putting in recovery as a practice, as part of your day. I've been following your work and I know that you guys are just on the cusp now of something super exciting with Apollo. And I think that is really promising that your product and many other products that are coming on the market that help get them to that end result faster or more efficiently. So what's new and exciting on your horizon?
A lot. I think this problem that we're talking about is no small task, challenge to overcome. And it's going to take a lot of work from a lot of us to really continue to talk about it and implement strategies for change. And so what we've been working on is developing and launching the Apollo technology, which came out of the University of Pittsburgh, which is technology that uses gentle layered frequencies of vibration that are delivered through a small wearable pod on the skin. It's about the size of an Apple Watch that you can wear on your ankle or your wrist. And these frequencies we've shown in double-blind randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials at the University of Pittsburgh, and now several other trials at other academic institutions that are able to improve cognitive performance under stress and recovery from stress in near real time, within minutes. And what we developed this for originally was to help people who had real difficulty coping with stress, like people with PTSD and depression and anxiety. And what we found out very quickly was that when we tested on healthy people, they responded very positively as well, because our body, we're a lot more similar than we are different, and our bodies and minds respond to stress fundamentally, as you're talking about the fight or flight system, in very similarly evolutionarily conserved ways. So it's very exciting. Well, the most exciting thing for us is to be able to release a technology like Apollo that starts to, that sort of opens these doors for people to be able to access more mindful states, more present states of improved nervous system balance, homeostasis, that facilitate enhanced performance and recovery that normally would be a huge challenge for us to access in real time. And so, and in addition, Apollo also trains people over time to be able to access those states more effectively by showing you that you can do it on your own. And so we're really building it as one of the first applications for artificial intelligence that truly serves the individual by gradually over time learning about each user and customizing and curating the timing of delivery and the specific frequencies of delivery to each individual user, so it's a truly personalized application for you that works with you throughout your day and grows with you as you use the technology. And so we'll be releasing this product in the fall, and we're very excited to bring it to the community. And there'll be also, in addition to releasing it to initially to elite athletes and entrepreneurs and business leaders and managers and people who, healthcare professionals, people who are under incredibly high stress, we are also working with businesses and starting business pilots to help actually get this to employees and to senior leadership as a wellness tool to help people feel better at work and therefore perform better at work, and also fall asleep more effectively at home when they're done with all of their busy work-related lives. And so this is something that we're very excited to bring to the community. We've been working on since about 2014. And you can check it out at apolloneuro.com or apolloneuroscience.com to find out more about our pre-order launch.
Yeah, it's really cool. And you've been really generous, and you've allowed me to use one and to experience that. So I have worn it, and it's a very, like you said, a very gentle and soothing kind of feeling when you're aware of it. But most of the time you actually have no awareness of it. And then there's this app where you can create different types of vibrations based on the kind of impact that you'd like it to have on you, like to energize you or to relax you. It's very cool because what it does is, as you said, it's not impossible to learn how to do it on your own. Everybody can, but it kind of shortcuts it and allows you to do it maybe less mindfully and get on with your day. So I wish you lots of success with that. And I really look forward to the release. Before we part, I'd love to hear one specific action that you think our listeners, the talent growers, can take today, this week, that can elevate their own ability to lead themselves, to lead others, especially from your vantage point here.
This is going to sound a little bit old school, but this is one of my favorite things to tell people because I think it's been lost in our society in terms of the way that we think about ourselves and the way we think about our work. It's really practicing something that comes from ancient tribal, South American tribal culture for thousands of years, and also Hindu and Buddhist culture. And it's called the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars consist of the foundation on which we build trust in ourselves and then trust in others. And the 4 pillars are things that you can practice every day, wherever you are. And if you practice them for yourself, over time, you'll become very good at them. And they are, number 1, self-gratitude, which is being thankful for yourself every day, just for being here, being present and having what you have. Number 2 is self-forgiveness, which is understanding and forgiving yourself for mistakes that you've made in the past, understanding that these are things that are going to happen and there are opportunities to learn. The 3rd is self-compassion, which is understanding that we will continue to make mistakes in the future and that we see these mistakes as opportunities for growth, not as failure and taking us down, but really opportunities for us to become stronger and better and the best version of ourselves. And then self-love, which is truly loving yourself for who you are. And if you practice those 4 pillars, gratitude, forgiveness, compassion, and self-love, even just by reciting them to yourself every day, these will start to become internalized into your sense of self and into your business and into the version of yourself that you put out into the world. And people will see that in you, and it will dramatically enhance your happiness and fulfillment, as well as your ability to be a strong leader.
Wow, thank you. That's very, very interesting. And it rings true. And it sounds complex to do. So if, let's say, a listener has never even considered one of these, let alone all 4, what would be a very practical way to just get started?
Just start first thing in the morning when you're real fresh and you've just woken up, is have a little journal by your bed or a notepad and just write the 4 pillars down. Just write down gratitude, think about something to be grateful for. Write down forgiveness, think about something to forgive yourself for. Write down compassion, think about something to be compassionate for. And then write down self-love and think about something to love yourself for. And then those, even just doing that in the morning when you wake up, will ensure that those stick in your mind throughout the day. And ideally, over time, you start to do that automatically. And you can write down the things that fit into each of those categories, but it's really just a practice makes perfect thing. And if you start by forcing yourself to just write those 4 words down, and some people I work with do it every day when they wake up and every day before they go to bed. And I can tell you that I see a huge difference in them just over a matter of weeks to months, just from doing that activity, because it changes the way that they see themselves and the way that they reflect on themselves every day.
Great. And just as a reminder, TalentGrow Dave is a psychiatrist. So he sees patients and he really does see that kind of a change in people that he advises. So perfect. I love that. Super actionable and very impactful. How can people learn more about you, stay in touch, Dave? Where should they follow you, like on social media? You mentioned the website earlier. We'll link to that in the show notes. Anything else?
Yeah, social media. I'm on Twitter at Dave Rabin, and I'm also on, of course, I think Facebook and as Dave Rabin and LinkedIn as Dr. David Rabin. So you can find me on there, and please feel free to reach out to me and send me a message. And also, if you go to apolloneuro.com or apolloneuroscience.com, you can find some email addresses to Apollo there, and we will respond to you if you reach out to us that way as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and knowledge with the Talent Growers, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Talent Growers, the funny thing is, I was listening to the end of this episode, getting ready to record the outro, and my son Tal was also listening in the background, and he said, Mom, I noticed that in their suggestion for that actionable tip at the end, a lot of your guests have this theme where they ask people to get a notebook and keep it by their bed and write things down in it. So this is a recurring theme. It must be because that really works. And I was like, yeah, because it does. So I hope that you take up Dave's advice, Dr. Rabin's advice, and take action on that suggestion and keep track of your reflections, your thoughts, your intentions like that. And I bet that it will make a big difference, and I would love to hear. And of course, any other insights that you had or big ahas, takeaways, questions, concerns that you had about this episode or any other, I'm always interested in hearing from you. I thank you for spending time here with me and my guests on the Talent Grow Show. I am Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at Talent Grow. And this is the Talent Grow Show. Until the next time, make today great.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Grow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.